For the accreditation cycle is the point 7.9 and 17.011, which used to be before the 7.11 reassessment and surveillance. So now there is no any more reference to surveillance in all the standard, because everything is made in the framework of an assessment program when you make as much assessment as needed depending on the CAB and depending on the situation and the risk related to that activity and that CAB. So now what we have is an assessment program. You need an assessment program for your cycle of accreditation. In every assessment, then you will have an assessment plan. When establishing the assessment program, you need to take in consideration all the locals and all the scopes that are covered by this CAB, and then make sure that during that cycle you're going to cover all these locations and scopes. So this is very important for you for the accreditation cycle. And then also the risk has to be taken in consideration when making how many assessments you're going to make, how many visits, how many checklists you're going to send, or things like this. And all these are called as assessment techniques. So you can make a combination of different assessment techniques in your assessment program. But the very important thing that is stated is that at least in 2 years, you have to see a part of the scope. So every 2 years, you need to make an assessment to see part of the scope. Mostly it's on site. But if you judge that as an accreditation body, you judge this is not necessary to be on site, you can use another technique, for example, the remote assessment. This is also possible according to the new 17.011. The important thing also that in the end of the cycle, there will be a reassessment. So unless you make a reassessment that will cover all the clauses of the requirements, then you cannot make the decision. So you need to have a reassessment covering all the requirements before the end of the cycle, and then decide about the reaccreditation. For the extension, the new 17.011 requires also to have a procedure for the extension. How do you make the extension? What are the details for that extension to be done? So there you have to make sure about the risk. As usual, you study the risk of this activity, how this extension can affect the cycle, how it can affect the scope of the accredited conformity assessment body. Then you can also choose, depending on this risk and depending on the extension itself, what assessment technique are you going to use. You can make a review, documentation. You can also make an on-site assessment. You can make a remote assessment, etc., etc. So this is very important to take in consideration. But also don't forget, because when you make an extension, the initial program of accreditation can be affected. So then you make a review of your accreditation program or your assessment program for the cycle of accreditation, so that there you can make some modifications, taking in consideration the extension of the scope. The other point in the 17.011, talking about the suspending, the reducing and withdrawing of accreditation. There also there must be clear criteria. When are you going to start a process for withdrawal? When are you going to make a suspension for accreditation? Or in which cases you're going to make a reduction of the scope of accreditation? All this must be clear in a procedure according to 17.011. But then also you have the possibility when some CABs, they have some fraudulent behavior, that you have to start the withdrawal process. This is in reference to the ILAC and AF joint resolution. When a CAB has fraudulent behavior, you have the possibility, and it's your duty to start the withdrawal of accreditation. So this is very important for you to have it, so that you have in the procedure. But also, if you're going to make a lifting of the suspension, once the CAB was suspended, but then you're going now to reinstate its accreditation, you need also to have clear criteria in your procedure about this.